Welcome to Cannabis Marketing Live, all puff, no fluff. I'm your host, Kendra Losi, and this is where we bring you the brightest, boldest, and most badass. It's Thursday, guys. All right, bring you the most badass tools, tech, and marketing minds in the cannabis and hemp industry. And today we have a guest who it doesn't get any more badass than this. The badassery level's high today. So we have Bryan Buckley, who is the Chief Executive Officer at Helmand Valley Growers Company. Welcome, Bryan.
Well, thank you for having me.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and I'm really happy to be on your show. This is awesome.
Fantastic. I really appreciate it. So, you guys, first of all, if you're watching, jump in and tell us hello and tell us where you're at. If you're watching the replay, be sure and write replay on there so we know. And if you have any questions, Bryan and I will be keeping an eye on the comments and questions even after the show. So be sure and let us know if you have anything or if you want to know anything else about what we're talking about today. I met Bryan at an event, was it 2 weeks ago now? And yeah, absolutely. And was really impressed with his business and what he's doing and what it stands for, and I wanted to bring him on to be able to share his story with you guys. So Bryan, to start out, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so Bryan Buckley is my name, obviously. I grew up in an area outside of Philadelphia called Doylestown in Pennsylvania. Went and attended the University of Massachusetts. After the events of 9/11, I decided it was just time for me to go earn my citizenship. So I left football, transferred to Villanova University, and got into the ROTC program, which upon graduation I was received my commission to the Marine Corps. In Infantry, Marine Reconnaissance, and in Marine Special Operations, better known as Marine Raiders. I've done deployments to Iraq, Africa, Southeast Asia, and also Afghanistan. After I left the service, I took a job with an ed tech firm, and then I really started noticing kind of what was going on with our veterans and some of the issues that they were facing, and decided to go forward and start this company called Helmand Valley Growers Company.
First of all, thank you for your service.
Thank you for paying your taxes.
Absolutely. What can I do? Paying taxes seems like a small price to pay for what you've done. So when you started, so let's talk a little bit about I really want to dive into how you came to start Helmand Valley Growers Company, and how you got started in there. So if you can tell us just kind of your story and how you got there.
Yeah, absolutely. I myself am a 100% disabled veteran. I kind of understand the capabilities and some of the limitations that the VA has, and this is by no means a knock on the VA. They're a federal agency, and they have certain things that they can only use. I really started paying attention to what was going on with the opioid epidemic and also with the veteran suicide rate. And, it was just kind of by chance. I was talking to one of my buddies who also served with me in the Raiders. And, he just kind of was looking good one week. And I just said, what's going on? And he just told me, listen, I gave up a fifth of Jack for a joint. And it was kind of comical. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Obviously out of the military, just put that out there. But and he just said, he goes, it's great, man. He's like, I don't black out. I'm not drinking and driving. I remember everything that happened the night before, and I wake up and I feel fine. And, it's like I've had some issues with opiates, and I don't really need those anymore. This has kind of paved the way. So that really just struck my curiosity. I just started talking with some people about what was going on in the cannabis field, even talking with a couple of people who were in Congress. And, pretty much they just said, they're like, listen, we get the emotional fight, and yeah, maybe it works, but we're not going to go out and back it up unless we really can have some data that proves that there is some medical benefits to this plant. So kind of got my marching orders that way passively, and I just started thinking like, all right, well, let's maybe go actors, but let's not just go and start a cannabis organization, do the green rush and whatever. Let's really make an impact, and let's continue to serve our country and serve our great heroes that have fought for it. So that's where we said we really want to dive into the medical cannabis research side. With that, we have able to partner up with a Israeli research firm called Medic. that they will be conducting the research, providing everything that we're doing, so we can back everything up with data. Um, and that's kind of how this came to be. And we're getting ready to launch here just with a recreational brand that we'll have hitting the shelves here in November. With proceeds of that, we'll go to veteran medical cannabis research. And then once we start going into our research aspects, we're going to take about 30 veterans a month. It'll be a 30-day process, and we're going to start dialing in strains that work for PTSD and sleep, and get back in front of Congress and literally pull out the paper with all of our doctors and everyone in front of us saying, this is what we found and this is what's working, and really push that fight on the federal side to make medical cannabis federal legal.
I love this so much, and there's so many reasons why I love what you're doing and fully appreciate it. And part of that is just I want to frame some of the issues that veterans have when they return home from deployments, or what's possible, right? And it's obviously not everyone, but
Right.
it's a large enough and significant enough number that's very, very impactful. And as a daughter of a Vietnam vet, like, I can tell you firsthand that PTSD doesn't just affect the person, it's the
Yeah.
families, it's the friends, it's the whole entire network of each person. So you start to look at how that amplifies and the impact. So can you talk a little bit about the issues that are surrounding vets when they return, and what that looks like?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think what people have to realize is, I always, people ask me just with the units I served in, and they're like, what was it like to be on the front lines or behind enemy lines? And it's not really what you would see in a traditional World War II type movie where there's a battlefield and you do your thing. We really started seeing this more in Vietnam when we first time really faced a counterinsurgency. And essentially, it doesn't matter if you're in a combat unit or what you're doing. It's a 360-degree battlefield, and it impacts everyone differently. And PTSD, literally, it's just not, hey, I saw something and I have nightmares about it. There's a lot of triggers that are onto it, possibly potentially 8 of them that really kind of hit those marks. So I always want to kind of keep people, it's like, hey, it's just not the people who are on the front lines fighting. It envelops everyone. And when you come back, it's a little different. And it's just a different experience you have. And when you have PTSD, the main thing that happens, I think, with people is they just feel so isolated. They feel they've experienced things and they can't really go to their next door neighbor and maybe express it or talk about it, or maybe they're embarrassed that there's something going on. I think one thing that's great about this generation is it's okay to go seek help now.
Oh my
Whatever
God.
you're having, any sort of an alcohol abuse, opiate abuse, drug abuse, you're having problems mentally, it's okay to go say, hey, I need to, take a knee here and seek some help and get myself right. And that's where, really what the whole kind of menace of PTSD is. It's just that kind of helpless feeling that a veteran will feel, and they really don't have that purpose anymore. And that's where you're seeing them just taking some of the opiates, maybe drinking too much, and then making those decisions where they won't be able to come back from. And that's where you're talking about the suicides. And that's where, we are such a mission-driven organization where we're passionate about these brave men and women who raised their right hand, to go fight for our American dream. It's now our turn to reciprocate that and give them their chance to let them live the American dream they fought so hard for. And you're right, that brings in their families and having that great life. And that's what we're thinking of. Not only we're going to go through and provide medical cannabis and back it up with research, but our organization is also going to look at hiring vets, because we want to have veterans making medicine for veterans and let them have that sense of purpose they did, just like they did when they served our country. They can continue to serve it in different facets.
Absolutely. And I've noticed, once again, it's very anecdotal with one Vietnam vet, but even, my dad and his friends, and everyone's very isolated, and it hasn't been, I would say, for him, he didn't look to get help from the VA until about 10 years ago. And
Yeah.
somewhere around there, I think things just got too much, where him, and then he started bringing in friends, and even that was his way of helping others, right? And finding
Yeah.
that purpose is helping other people get into the VA. So being able to have that, I think, is critical beyond words.
Yeah.
For people. So when we talk about PTSD, you mentioned opioids and suicide. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I just want to make sure that there's a complete understanding of of how the problem, of how big the problem is, because we don't necessarily hear about it as much.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously the opioid epidemic, or maybe even you want to call it a pandemic, I mean, that is impacting our entire nation. Where, like I said, medical personnel only have certain tools in their toolkit, and they're going to try to do the best they can to diagnose you. And this is what they have essentially is opiates. It we've talked to doctors where you see they call it the VA cocktail, where they're getting uppers and downers and lefts and rights, and then other things to counter that stuff, and it's just craziness. And they're like, it's really almost like rewiring people's brains at that point. It's just so unhealthy what they're doing, and they start forming a dependency. And then even the worst case is when you take it away, and then people hit the streets to try to find some way to get that fix again. And that's one of the big problems with that, where we're looking at this green plant. It might be an all-in-one that could maybe solve a couple different symptoms just using that versus taking a bunch of different types of opiates. The suicide rate, yeah, I think it's a very real and tough thing with veterans. I mean, I've experienced not suicidal thoughts or anything of that nature, but where you're just kind of feeling alone at times, where you kind of, for me, it's like I was a Marine without a mission before I really started getting onto this Helmand Valley Growers Company. And I think that's what some of our veterans kind of face is like, I was doing all of this when I served our country, and I was doing all that. And I had this great identity. I was a soldier. I was a Marine, a coastie, a sailor, airman, whatever it may be. And now it's all gone. And that's where I think you see some of the depression, and they think maybe it's just better if I'm not even around anymore, because maybe I'm doing some dumb things out in town, or where I'm just being disappointment to people. And it's never too late. It's like, I think if you go through life and there's a book written about you, would anyone want to read about it? And what our veterans did in their military service is great, but that's just one chapter of your life. And you need to kind of keep looking forward to what's my next opportunity? What else can I do? How else can I make an impact? Is it with my kids, my wife, my family, next career, whatever it may be? And that's what we want to kind of do here on the educational side of our organization. Is really just kind of, there are options, there are opportunities, and we can help you out here with that.
It's so powerful. It's amazing to, and I can see it, right? Like, it makes sense if you've had this role and taken on all these responsibilities, and then you come back and you're like, oh, here's what I am now. Because I think for a lot of, and I might be projecting, so you can feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think for a lot of people, if you're a Marine, you're a Marine. Like, it's part of your identity, right? If you're in the Navy, you're in the Navy, and it's part of your identity. So when that goes away, if you don't have something else to help, or a strong support system to help back that up, and support system, it could be there and you just don't feel that it's there, I think. I end up teaching a lot of veterans and active duty military when I teach my marketing classes and social media classes. And I've had several come up to me, especially since I mentioned in passing that I'm in the cannabis industry. I've had several come up to me and give me anecdotal stories about how they started smoking, or how their buddy started smoking and went from suicidal to healthy and balanced, or feeling healthy and balanced.
Absolutely.
So can you talk a little bit about how you mentioned that you found, and how you came to this solution, but like I said, a lot of this information is anecdotal. How do you structure that? How do you go about helping change that?
Yeah, and I think what really needs to be done here is normalizing medical cannabis and proving the medical benefits to it. And not just like, hey, here's a piece of paper and it has a bunch of numbers on it, and everyone's going, okay, that looks great, I guess. What we're going to do here, I'm really big into adaptive learning, and I used that when I was working for an ed tech firm, and I really believed in it. I mean, it literally forces you down the path of resistance, so you actually start learning things, and it goes back into the area 9 part of your brain, which is essentially where everything's evolving. So with our education and learning director, Matt Denham, that's one of his key tasks, is he's putting together an educational platform using adaptive learning for people to educate themselves and understand what is cannabis, what is PTSD, what is the mission to Helmand Valley Growers. And as our research grows and matures, we're going to keep updating our system, so people who maybe we can't touch during our research they can go through and say, hey, maybe this or that, and I can go there and have a little bit more education walking into a dispensary versus just kind of going there and be like, hey, what do you have? Okay, it's green. I guess it's going to get me high, and great. I mean, that might not be what you want to do. I mean, I'll be the first one to tell you, our PTSD strain, that's going to be very low doses THC. I mean, that's medicine. I mean, you get up, you take your medicine, but you need to get on with your day. The nighttime one, sure, that's going to probably be a little bit higher THC because that's just what we're kind of seeing. But it's just like anything. I mean, if you need to get up and you have some arthritis or you have whatever and you take a pill, that's how we want to make this, where it's just like, all right, fine, the person is on medicine. It might be cannabis. Got it. They're still here. They're being productive, and kind of helps them just go on with their day.
It definitely sounds like there's some demystification and education that needs to go on. So, making it from, right, that's what I take to get stoned and I feel better, to here's how I can take it and be productive all day long.
Yep.
And feel healthier and more balanced. But it's taking away that almost like, it's just the education piece, like you said. You were saying something else at the end of what you were just talking about that I wanted to ask you about, and I completely just forgot my question. But when you start to look at your research and the education that you're looking to provide for people, what comfort level are you finding? Where would you say things are now? And is it more comfortable? I'm assuming it's more comfortable for the vets than for the government and the VA.
Yeah, you know what? Exactly. It's been really interesting. When I really started deep diving into this was probably in the middle of 2016 to try to start thinking like, what was this and how can we attack this in the most appropriate manner. And it was a totally different world in 2016. I think now it's getting a little more normalized. You're seeing things in Congress. Things are hitting the news channels where it's like, hey, the STATE Act went through and the Safe Banking Act is made out of the House. And, you even had President Trump at one point say, why are these people paying federal taxes yet they don't have FDIC protection and they're paying 280E? Because that doesn't make sense as a businessman. And I just think things like that. And you even have a sitting president who said, when there was stuff going through with the VA medical cannabis research, he goes, I think I might be able to sign that. Like, that's something I can understand on the medical side. I mean, that's a sitting U.S. president. When's the last time? We've never heard that before. So that's where I think things are kind of getting a little more normalized. And, to your point with your father's generation of the Vietnam veterans, what we're seeing is they're all retiring now. And they probably suppressed some of those feelings. Now, what's it like with idle minds? You start kind of reflecting on things. And talking with people in the VA, they're like, we're starting to see a lot more of our Vietnam veterans coming out with PTSD because they're retired and are kind of realizing there's something going on here. And now you're seeing some of them even going out and going and getting medical cannabis and seeing it working. So that's kind of like the reefer madness era. They're kind of buying into it. Yeah. So that's where it's kind of interesting. Like, our generation, I think, has it. And you're just looking at the generation above us that they were told, drugs are bad. Marijuana is insane. It's the worst thing ever. To now it's kind of being demystified, where even I think Newt Gingrich said, he goes, if a doctor ran into the Amazon and came out of the cannabis plant, we'd be giving them Nobel Prizes all over the place because there's just a lot of potential with this plant. That's
true. And you're absolutely right. That's what it was. It was retirement and idle minds that started everything. But it also, I will say, because he's going to love that I'm talking about him, but, there was some health issues. And so he had a stroke and I ended up going to the VA in the orientation with him.
Yeah.
And from an outsider civilian perspective, there were all generations in that room, right? You had some Korean War vets, you had Vietnam War vets, you had Afghanistan and Iraq. Like, there were so many generations that it really drove home to me just how many people are impacted, right? Mm-hmm. Like, living in San Diego, it's a military city. Not everyone lives in a military city, so we're used to seeing it, we're used to being around it. But when you talk to people outside, you don't really fully realize those numbers are people, and those people are in front of you.
Yeah.
And so when you start to look at the numbers and the people and the ways people, and like you said, everything comes out in a different form. Mm-hmm. So PTSD, you mentioned 8 triggers earlier. There might be, it's not just one thing. It doesn't always look the same.
No, you're exactly right. And that's one thing I always stress with people is PTSD isn't a military issue. It's a human condition. Right. And there are things, everything from, being shot to imminent death to sexual harassment that will provide PTSD for people. And that's, kind of one of the things we know as a byproduct of our product that we'll have is, well, hey, if it works for a veteran, why wouldn't it work for me? And that's kind of the way we want to go. And we know veterans, we can lead this fight because ultimately with Congress, listen, they sent us to war. Now we're back and it's time to fix us and help us do it. And that's where I think this thing can really gain some momentum.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So when we talk about, we're touching on education and going to research, you mentioned working with Israel, which is awesome. Can you talk a little bit more about that and if there's specific results you're looking for, or what you're looking for, and is there anything people can do as well?
Yeah, I mean, the main thing that what people can do is this. To do good, you need money, and there are things that we're doing out there for donations. I'll provide my information if you want to reach out to me. How you can help out. We have a T-shirt drive going on where all proceeds are going to that. Because roughly it's going to cost about $350 per veteran to get them through the 30-day course. But like I said, this is a full, they get all the treatment here where we got nurses and doctors and caseworkers. We're drawing blood. I mean, this is going to be ran extremely professional because my end state is literally to be behind the Resolute desk and have the president sign this thing into federal law. So we're not messing around with this thing. And, right now, can I tell you what the strain's going to look like or anything? No. That's part of the, how we're going to do this study is kind of look at it. We're looking at structure and stability, and then we're going to start manipulating the genetics a little bit and then start seeing what our hit rates are with our veterans. And then once we get to a good spot, we're going to start here in California. We're going to more or less our proof of concept. Then we're going to move it to a different state, do the same thing again. That's more of our validation. And then at that point, we'd be in two different economies, two different states, same veterans, same problems. Then we know we got something, and we can really start making a full force on the government as well as going after more medical cannabis states. Absolutely. I mean, our ultimate goal is we could be the first medical cannabis brand that, no kidding, has efficacy and data behind it that's available to the consumer in a dispensary.
Amazing. And it's good that you're working with Israel too, because they're so far ahead in terms of research.
They are awesome. They're great. They're great people. They're all veterans too. So, I mean, and obviously they live in a rough part of the world. And, I mean, they all suffer from PTSD, the whole, probably population. And they're just great is listening to. And yeah, like I said, they're so far advanced on us. And they are just been great mentors to us and great partners. Alon Blot, who I work with closely, the guy's like a brother to me, and just served in the Israeli Defense Forces, and just terrific. And he's very passionate about this project as well.
Oh, fantastic. So when we look at you've mentioned, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions over again because I really want to drive home the mission of what you guys are doing.
You got it.
Can you talk about Helmand Valley Growers Company?
Yeah, so I think what really we're going after was, clearly, as I mentioned before, medical side, veterans, Congress, get this thing federally medical approved. Just that easy, right?
Yeah, so and then on Wednesday, what are you going to do?
Exactly. So we really wanted to keep a military brand going with this. So my unit, when I was with the Marine Raiders, we served in the Helmand province in Afghanistan. People don't know what Helmand province is. In my opinion, it was the most volatile area in Afghanistan, highly contested, mainly due to the Helmand River Valley, which if you had to draw a picture of Afghanistan, you probably wouldn't draw the Helmand Valley. We call it the green zone. It has a huge river in it. Literally they throw out their poppy seeds, they grow, they cultivate into heroin, the Taliban tax them, and that's how they fuel their insurgency. So a very highly contested area. In our unit, when you eliminate a member of the Taliban, you became part of the Helmand Valley Gun Club and you get a tattoo on your arm. So we were thinking, how can we keep a military brand and kind of keep it back to, what we were doing? And that's where we said HVGC, and we just said Helmand Valley Growers Company. And we said, well, that sounds pretty cool. And we ran it by the guys and they all liked it. So we're like, all right, off we go. And then, if you see our logo, you'll kind of understand it's very important to what we're trying to accomplish here. We have a shield, obviously a military looking shield to it. We have our cannabis leaf, but also you will see in there, it's called the Southern Cross, which is a constellation you can see out in the South Pacific. Why is that important? In World War II, that was when the Marine Raiders were first established and are recognized in some circles as the first special operations unit that America had. The Marine Raiders during our island hopping campaign would use celestial navigation, and they use the Southern Cross to kind of get to their objective and then find their way back to the boats. We wanted to incorporate that because, yep, our brave men and women have gone off and they found the battlefield, and maybe they physically found their way back home, but maybe they're not all the way back home, and we want to kind of be that guiding path to get them back fully, let them live that life that, the American dream, like I talked to you about, so they can go off and just be prosperous and do great things in their civilian life. And that's why we really chose that logo. And like I said, with our strains that when they come out, we're going to have a sheepdog strain. The reason why, if people know the story between a sheepdog, the wolf, and the flock, or the sheep, basically the sheepdog and the wolf both look the same, both have fangs, both look like they're meant to kill. The difference is the wolf will try to kill the flock, and the sheepdog will do whatever it has to take to defend the flock. And that's what we kind of look at as our brave men and women are the sheepdogs that are out there defending the gates of freedom to keep the wolves outside the gates. And then our nighttime one, it's just going to be kind of simple. We'll probably call it night ops because that's what you're doing. You're just going to go to sleep. It's nighttime, and off you go. So we really want to kind of keep that military brand. I think it's fun, has a story behind it, and people can kind of understand and relate why we're doing what we're doing.
Fantastic. While you were talking, I pulled up the screen with I pulled up your Instagram feed with your logo
Nice.
to show the stars as well as the logo and the meaning. I love that. It's great that you were able to put it all together. Your designer was fantastic.
No, they did a tremendous guy. He's actually a former Marine himself, and he totally got it. And the big thing is, this is an organization that has a soul to it. Like I said, we're just not out there in the green rush. We're not out there to make the money. We're out there to solve a problem, and quite frankly, that's what Marines do. We provide solutions.
And you're solving a problem that affects more people than I think people realize.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like I said, it's not just one person or it's not their problem, right? Because I didn't serve. Why is it my problem? But that's not actually the case.
Yeah. And that's, a nice part is everyone at Helmand Valley, we still feel like we're serving our country.
Love it. I love it. So a couple things here that we're doing differently today that I mentioned is that one, normally we don't, the promotion side of what people's business are is very small. But given the purpose-driven mission here and just how important it is, I wanted to give Bryan a chance to promote your fundraiser that you're doing right now, because you mentioned those. And then I've had your contact information underneath you a little bit while you were talking, but two things. One, I'm going to put the screen up with the promotion on it. So can you please tell people a little bit about the gear and the promotion that you're doing in order to help fund your launch?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So what we're doing here is, really we want to get our shirts and our brand out there for people to kind of get excited about what we're doing, and also really set the tone of what this organization is all about. And so 100% of all proceeds for all this gear will go right to veteran medical cannabis research. And see, we got some really cool shirts. We got some baseball shirts that really people are really enjoying. They love those. Hoodies are always a big hit. We got the V-necks. And a couple other gear in there. And, in time, we're getting some requests from people where they want tank tops and some other things, and we're definitely going to come through with that here in the next month or so. But yeah, like I said, we just really wanted to get the brand out there and set the tone for our organization that this is a benevolent organization. We're here to solve a problem. And maybe you're not on the Helmand Valley group team on any paperwork, but we can all be in the same fight together. And it's your chance to kind of give back and help our veterans and to solve a national issue.
Right. I think that, sorry, while you're talking, I've been perusing the site with the shirts and sharing that so people can see them. These are the shirts, you guys. All proceeds go to Veterans Research, as Bryan mentioned. But I think that, to your point, it's not, you're starting with this, okay, here's how we're going to help. Like you said, here's how we can help the veterans. Here's how we can help find solutions using cannabis to do that. But then the bigger thing is that'll help society overall, because the
Absolutely.
opioid crisis is huge and it impacts everybody. Once again, whether or not, oh, it's the homeless person I see all the time. That's not the case. That is not the case. It impacts all of us. So you guys, great cause, fantastic mission. Here are some shirts. There's links below. Let me switch back over so you can see the links. And I think that, is there anything else that you wanted to mention about the shirts and the launch?
No, like I said, hey, buy them, tell your friends about them, wear them. Like I said, it's this one team, one fight here, so we would love to have people help supporting us.
Love it. Love it. Can you talk about your upcoming launch a little bit? You touched on it. I just want more details for people.
Yeah. So right now we're actually just in the middle of finishing up our box designs, which is a little bit more complicated than one would think. But we want to make sure we're doing it right. So yeah, we're just kind of out right now, just promoting it. We're looking for an early November launch here, definitely throughout California. Once we kind of get in with the dispensaries and who we're going to be working with, we will blast that all out. And what will be cool is what I want to work with some dispensaries, and we've already been talking to some, is we're just not going to be there, hey, here's a launch event and here's some swag and buy your stuff and you get 10% off. We're actually going to sit there and kind of talk through and hopefully do educational events and kind of talk everyone through about what we're doing and teach them more, not just about our mission, but what we're learning about this plant as we continue with our research. We'll have Niomedic will have no problem coming out all this, and we just want to be very much immersed with the cannabis community and the whole community, actually, and just really kind of normalize this and let people touch and feel us and know it's real, and just see the progress that we're doing and get people excited.
Absolutely. I love this. Okay, I'm going to switch gears to a speed round.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Let's do it.
Ready for the speed round? I keep mentioning that I need to get more technical and actually bring in like a clock and a timer with the music. But given the way technology's been working this week, I'm just happy we're able to be live right now. Okay, so first of all, what are your favorite cannabis products?
I'm a big fan of vapes, and probably my favorite strain would be Trainwreck.
Nice.
It's kind of funny. I just went into a bud tender one time. I'm like, I want something that if I go into a bar and I have this, I'm kind of already there with everyone. And he goes, "You need Trainwreck," and I'm like, "Perhaps you didn't hear what I said." And he goes, it's like, I understand. He told me, and I tried it, and you take that's one thing I loved about cannabis was you can take 2 hits off your vape pen and you're in a good state of mind. Where I'd say alcohol, it's almost like you're driving a ship. You have some drinks, you feel good, and maybe then the alcohol catches up with you a little bit later and you're really out of it. So that was one of the benefits of cannabis, where even talking to some of my friends are like, yeah, it's more precision guided, I would say.
Definitely. I love that it's called Trainwreck.
Yeah,
because I would not think that would put me equal to where my friends are if they're having a drink or two.
I would expect I'm getting pushed down a wheelchair or something.
Exactly. That sounds more like a night in Vegas afterward versus
exactly
versus a normal night out. And then, so are there any books or podcasts or publications that you are paying attention to right now?
I mean, one of my probably favorite cannabis books that I've read is Cannabis Revealed. That just is really interesting, and it's the type of book you just don't read once. You need to kind of go back and read it again, because you're just going to keep learning from it. And it's very captivating, where they will tell you the stories and kind of set it up that way, then go into the science. So it's just not a straight science textbook. It's a little bit more personal to you. I enjoy Entrepreneur Magazine. I think anyone who's trying to start a small business, get that. Read it, learn it, live it. And also they have one called Green Entrepreneur coming out that's more focused on the cannabis side, which is really interesting. Marijuana Business Magazine is good. And then, Cannabis Business Times. I like to keep that on my phone, and that just kind of keeps you updated. If you have a little downtime, you just kind of go through and see what's happening. And, podcasts, I'm really open. I follow Green Flower or Entrepreneur, and they will throw some things on there. And, is anything that's kind of, strikes my fancy, I guess, that I'm interested in, whether it be banking solutions or what's going on with 280E or whatever it may be. If I have a drive up to LA, I just throw on a podcast and I'll just sit there and listen to what people have to say. And, definitely too, when you kind of, the book Big Weed, I think is a great book too, where you kind of learn and hear their mistakes. And it's he's very much don't do what I did and do this and that. I just think they're great educational pieces. And that's the main thing. I think you really got to educate yourself on this industry, understand it, because it's very complicated. It's not like any other small business we have. So the better you can learn from this stuff and surround yourself with really smart people, the more successful you're going to be.
Absolutely. And are there any is there any information you'd recommend if people wanted to find out more about what's going on with veterans?
You know, that's a great thing. I mean, on the veteran side, I think there's a lot of veteran groups out there looking at things differently. I don't know if I'm going to advocate for any one particular. I really like the Veteran Cannabis Coalition. They're really kind of tied in on the legislative side and provide you some really good insight on what's going on with these bills, where are they at, and then more personalized too, of like what each member of Congress is actually thinking at that point. So Eric does a great job there. So that's one of the ones I really like to kind of pop in, look and see what he's doing, just because you're going to learn something every day, and he's really tied into Capitol Hill. And unfortunately, we're going into an election cycle right now, better or worse. But what happens is everyone digs in, and we probably won't see some of these cannabis bills, the big ones that we thought we're going to get through in the spring. We won't see them until 2021. But like I say, people like that, the Veteran Cannabis Coalition, is always good to kind of hear what they have to say and how things are moving along.
Absolutely. Awesome. Fantastic. And we talked about the logo. Where can people find you? I've been showing your contact information here, but it's below you right now. Okay. So can you highlight a little bit where people can find you?
Yeah, I think great spot, is on Instagram. So that's just at HVG Company. And that's great way you can reach out to us, connect with us. We'll go from there. If you want to reach out to me personally, I don't mind giving out my email address. It's bryan@hvgcompany.com. If you want to get into the fight with us and help support what we're doing, please reach out, and we can make some things happen.
And buy the shirts. They're awesome.
Shirts.
I can't wait for mine.
They are awesome. So I'll be rocking them tonight at the event that we're going to. So we get really good feedback from them.
Fantastic. Bryan, thank you so much for your time. You guys, if you're watching and you want to know more, you've seen all the places to go and reach out and find out. Just stay up to date on the information, stay up to date on how they're doing, what they're doing, where you can buy, when you can buy. And thank you very, very much for everything you're doing, Bryan. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for taking the time to have a sit-down talk with us. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right, you guys, thank you. And like I said, put anything in the comments, and we'll be responding. All right, have a great rest of your day. Bye.